Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and knock this out. Alright, first question. If one set produces more than 50% of muscle growth and two sets produces almost 100%, how does the argument you need adequate volume to produce muscle growth make sense? Couldn't you do one set each workout and still get over 50% of the growth needed? That's a good question, but here's the problem with that logic. That data is for novice lifters, right? All the studies that look at that when they're comparing like the 1 versus 2 versus 3 sets, this is for novice lifters. And this is talking about roughly limit sets. In other words, if you come in and do an easy set, it's not going to give you this effect. If you take a 5 rep or a 10 rep set to pretty much failure, you're going to get something like 50% of the possible muscle growth in a novice lifter. But you've got to think about it this way. What do we expect novice lifters to gain in the course of their first year? Like 15 pounds, 20 pounds of muscle, right? That's usually a reasonable expectation. What's half of that? 7 pounds, 10 pounds at the most? Most of you guys who are going to the gym and training are not going there to only gain 7 or 8 pounds of muscle in your first year. And that's the problem with that, number one. And that's assuming you're training your entire body. If you're so lazy as to only do one set, you're probably not even doing exercises that work everything. So you might only be doing your upper body at that point. Well, that's going to turn into like 3 pounds of muscle for your first year in the gym. Then you're going to get like 2 pounds in your second year. Like basically, someone is going to train for 5 years straight to end up gaining 10 pounds of muscle. That's ridiculous. It's absurd. That's not a good use of your resources. Number two, for more advanced lifters, that's not going to work. I can honestly tell you that I've messed with the 1 set thing, 2 set thing as an advanced lifter before when I had reasons why I couldn't really be in the gym a long time. And guess what? You actually regress a little bit. It's almost impossible without drugs to maintain all of your gains. You actually slowly detrain over time. So what you find is that the more advanced you get, the more your minimum effective volume to make progress goes up. Right, and we actually reach a threshold to where if you're not doing enough workload, it starts to regress. And when you're talking about doing very, very low set training, you better be doing limit sets. You're going to have to pick extremely effective exercises, and you're going to have to push them. You're going to have to push them hard. And that's just to hopefully get 80%. 70%, I don't know the results of what you would have gotten just doing 3 sets instead of 1. And that's a best case scenario. I mean, you got to be realistic about that. So no, this doesn't work. It doesn't work. I've tried it. I've messed with it. All the data that suggests it can give you, a fraction of the gains is for novice lifters. The more advanced you are, you're going to find this harder and harder to do, if not impossible. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. I'm currently running your novice program, and I've reached a point where I am no longer improving my deadlift. I can do 200 kilogram deadlift raw, no straps, belt, or chalk. Should I invest in any of them to help or just keep working at it? I'm asking because I've been making good progress on my other exercises, especially squats and bench. I started with a 100 kilogram squat and now can do 145 for 25. And I've hit 180 kilogram for a single and moved from 60 kg to 100 kg on the bench. I'm at 184 centimeters and I weigh 118 kilograms. Hope you can help. All right, you're a taller guy at a higher body weight. And for those who are seeing the 25 reps, he means 5 sets of 5. Because you can look at his max and you can look at that and realize that's what he's doing. He's running my novice program, the original one, which is a 5x5. All right, brother, your deadlift is not lagging at all. You're actually doing really well. Look, if you've hit 180 on the squat and you're now doing 200 on the deadlift, that's 20 kilos apart. That's pretty reasonable. Now, the fact that you've done this without chalk impresses me. First thing we should be talking about here, if you want to improve more at this point, at your strength levels, yes, chalk is a must. In fact, chalk is a safety device. You need to think of chalk that way. Chalk isn't just about lifting more weight. Chalk is about not ripping the skin on your hands. Like chalk will actually reduce injuries. So yes, you need to be using chalk, right? You need to be using chalk. That shouldn't be seen as a crutch at all. That's going to keep you from tearing your hands because you need to keep them dry, and that's what the chalk does. Absolutely invest in chalk or some liquid grip, right? Priority. As far as a belt, I'd say you're strong enough that if you want to start incorporating a belt, I don't see any problem with it. Totally reasonable at this point in the game for you. So if you want to belt up, then get a belt. Straps, no, I don't think you're going to need straps. I think very few lifters actually need straps, right? Very few need straps. They have their place. I own a set. I haven't used mine this year, but I have a set. Most people don't need them. But at this point for you, chalk, number one priority. And if you want to start working in belted training, I think that's perfectly reasonable for you at this point to keep improving. But your progress is good. Your deadlift is actually good. You're not lagging. You're not deficient. Everything actually looks to be on point. All right, next question. Jason, I don't know if you are aware, but Jeff Nippard's girlfriend, Stephanie Buttermore, who has a PhD and is a self-proclaimed fitness guru, heavily promotes binge eating junk food. And also has a separate Instagram account where she's showing where she posts nothing but pictures of junk food. Also, her most watched videos of her binge eating 5,000 to 10,000 calories. Now, I would assume Jeff's science background is a reason for her to stop promoting this. Also, she has her own website where she sells t-shirts and promotes binge eating junk food. Now, I'm not aware of this, and I'm not necessarily going to say I know this is a fact based upon this statement. But if this is true, yeah, that's absolutely ludicrous. I would hope that Jeff would step in and say something and realize this is problematic. We all know that binge eating junk food is not healthy. We know that junk food is the cause of obesity and diabetes and everything else in Western countries. Now, people say, no, that's not true. Yeah, it actually is, because if we weren't over consuming all this refined garbage, we wouldn't have these problems. Like, they would still exist for a number of people. Look, it is possible for obesity to exist outside of junk food, right? Diabetes exists outside of junk food. But they would be much, much, much rare. They would be such a tiny percentage in comparison. And that's the thing that blows my mind, is that people act like not consuming this stuff is some restrictive, horrible diet. We didn't have this stuff 100 years ago. This is a modern invention. You're not restricting yourself or torturing yourself by not consuming it. That's sheer stupidity. So if this is actually true, what you're saying, then I don't know. Maybe this kind of paints a certain picture of Jeff that, again, is quite a negative one. It's quite a negative one. And I'm not saying we are who we date. Believe me, we aren't who we date, but the people that we date can lead us down a bad path. And I've learned this myself, my own firsthand experience, unfortunately. So this is a case of, again, if this is what he does, and you got a guy like Jeff who seems to just want to stand around and smoke weed and giggle on camera, put out bad workout programs, hang out with people like Strap-On Destiny, then wow, okay, this just kind of puts a nail in the coffin, Mr. Above the Knee Rack Pull Pothead. So yeah, I guess so. I mean, I guess that's what they do together. He sits around and smokes weed and binges on junk food, maybe. I don't know. I hope that's not the case, and I really hope this isn't true, but if it is, I'll investigate it. This is something he needs to be called out on. All right, next question. Hello, Jason. I would really like your opinion on this because other than the Norwegian study, I can't find anything really going into this. How good or bad would training 6 days a week with 2 sets a day on the chin-up, bench, squat, overhead press, bent row, and deadlift be 12 total sets per week per exercise with the overlap from the big movements bringing it to more than 12 per muscle group a week? Thank you. Yeah, this is really complicated. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing that. Some of the aspects of the Norwegian study are flawed, and there seems to be a growing body of evidence that for more advanced lifters, right? More advanced lifters, I'm not talking about novices, that anything more than twice a week frequency outside of the additional volume that it adds doesn't really seem to help with muscle growth. It doesn't seem to. That seems to be about the frequency threshold to where we maximize gains. So at that point, if you're adding frequency purely for the purpose of more total volume, yeah, fair enough. But we also have to beg the question of how hard is it to get enough volume twice a week? In other words, let's talk about chest training, right? Let's talk about flat bench and let's talk about incline bench. I mean, that's a perfect example. You guys see me on my max effort days. I usually ramp through about 5 heavy singles. And then I do 5 sets of incline. Same thing, my speed work, I do 5 sets of speed bench, 5 sets of incline. Well, that ends up being about 10 work sets for my chest twice a week for 20 sets. And I could always add more volume on those, right? I could always add a little more. as I obviously had things like triceps and stuff in. So the question we get to here is it really beneficial either? I don't know that it is. I don't know that it is. The data doesn't really seem to fully support it, other than that one Norwegian study, which really didn't get peer reviewed. I'd like to see more data into it, more research into it. But what I will say is that when you look at some of the best athletes in the world, whether it's powerlifting, NFL, whatever, the sort of model that's a upper lower base 4-day-a-week split seems to be extremely successful. It seems to be extremely successful. And no one is making better progress by doing something different, even if it's equal. And that's just something to think about. That's just something I would think about with that. It's not that it's necessarily guaranteed to be the best. It's just nothing else seems to be beating it at any level, in any strength-based sport for hypertrophy or performance. All right? So just something to, again, put your thought into. Not trying to be dogmatic, but we need to be aware of that fact. Nothing better seems to be out there, even if some things seem to be equal. And what we're suggesting here is we're getting into grounds that hasn't really been fully studied or looked at heavily for more advanced lifters. As a novice, you'll be fine doing that. You'll be just fine. You'll make great gains if you're still not quite an intermediate lifter yet, and you choose to go that route. All right, guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.